We are in the midst of the Parshiyot that we read about the stories of Yosef. Those are the stories that we always read in Kislev around Hanukkah time, and beginning with his birth all the way to the very end when we last see him in Parshat Vayechi. And we are going to be doing a little bit of scanning over this period of time. You will have noticed that while you hear from Yosef for the first time when he begins to tell his dreams to his brothers and manages to evoke first their jealousy and then finally their hatred, you don't hear anything about Yosef's feelings. You don't have any idea at all about how he feels about the reaction of his brothers and then of his father, nor do you have any idea about what may have provoked that earlier. The only thing that we're told is that he was beautiful, and the same terms that are used for Rachel are used for him. And the other thing that we hear, of course, is that his father showed him some favoritism by making him that couldnt pasim, as if it wasn't enough for him to arouse jealousy, this special treatment now followed by the dreams in which he first sees the sheaves, and his sheaf is in the middle, and everybody's bowing to him. And then, of course, later on, the dream of the stars and the sun and the moon and so on. How did Yosef feel when he lost his mother? We know that he was old enough to walk in front of her when they went to confront Esav and kind of like protect her. Binyamin, who came from the same mother, had no feelings because she was dead just as he was born. Is it possible that that special treatment that Yaakov gave him were nothing more than an attempt to compensate for the fact that he has no mommy? Is it possible that he was giving him this extra love and affection that the other brothers got from their mothers, and he did not get it at all? Is it possible that he continuously harbored resentment, anger at being abandoned by his mother, and the fact that his father buried his mother on the side of the road? You will remember that it is prior to his death that Yaakov says, I know you carry a grudge in your heart, but that's never spoken. We don't hear of any of those feelings, and the Torah doesn't share these things with us. It just tells us what he said. Trying to overcome some of the anger and the jealousy and even the hatred and resentment that the brothers had, Yaakov sends Yosef, as you remember, to look after his brothers. Did he know that he was sending him into danger? But Yosef goes, Hineni. And when he meets that man, that mysterious man, whether he was an angel or whatever, and asks, did you happen to see my brothers? Et achai anochi mevakesh. I want my brothers. I seek my brothers. Is that perhaps just a simple statement, I'm looking for them? Do you know where they are? It would be enough to ask, do you know where they are? But the very statement, I seek my brothers, might perhaps give us a small clue to the fact that Yosef wanted a relationship with those same brothers that had come to despise him. He's thrown into the pit, you remember, they tear the coat off, and he's sold somehow into slavery, whether with the brothers' collusion or without the brothers' collusion, depending on the Mefarshim. You hear nothing. You're not told about his screams, about his cries, about how he begged them to take him out. You don't hear this. You will only hear it much, much later. Much later you will hear it. You will hear it when the brothers come down to Egypt, and when he accuses them of being spies and he puts them in prison, he hears them because he knows Hebrew. They don't know that he knows Hebrew, and he is disguised as Tzofnat Paneach with an Egyptian name, you understand? Not completely unaware that he understands everything they say. And what do they say? Oh, this is God's punishment for what we did to him when he screamed and begged us and we refused to listen. You only hear about it in flashback. Yosef remains silent, and the next time you will actually hear him is, of course, with Eshet Potiphar, when she tries to seduce him. Yes.
Heard that as a flashback, but the Torah does say that when they threw him into the bar, they walked away and they ate lechem, they had a meal to show us,
How callous?
how callous they were and how Yosef.
Perhaps. But you know that because you know what comes next. So you're filling in the pieces which the Torah didn't give you. If you're reading it for the first time and you're seeing it, you don't know that he's screaming. You don't know if he's alive or dead until he's actually sold. You don't know that. You're told that, of course, he came to the house of Potiphar, where he became eventually not merely a field slave, but a house slave, and he becomes the powerful man. And then, of course, we don't hear him during this entire time until Eshet Potiphar tries to seduce him. And at that point, he says, I could not do this. I would be sinning against God and against my master, who's been nothing but kind to me. She, of course, the scorned woman, screams rape. What does he try to do? And he ends up in prison. The next words that we will hear is, of course, when he manages to interpret the dreams of the butler and the baker, who were also in prison with him. Again, nothing else during all these years in prison. Until, of course, finally the story of Paro's dreams when he is brought up. They change his clothes, they wash him up. You see, by the fact that they had to change his clothes and clean him up, you understand that things were not, it was no picnic down there. And he comes before Paro and he says, I hear you know how to interpret the dreams. And of course, at that point, what you've got is not the man that Rashi described, shemisalsel b'se'aro memashmesh be'enav. He's not the self-absorbed, vain boy who used to curl his hair and make his eyes look more beautiful than they already were. Because that's the way Rashi describes him based on the Medrash there. That he was a self-absorbed narcissist. And that his dreams spoke about these aspirations for power, for dominion over everybody else. No wonder they despised him. Now, quite broken, coming out of prison, Yosef comes up and he says, oh, no, it's not me. God is the interpreter. And over again, he evokes God's name, even as he speaks to Paro. Some people say that he's called Yosef HaTzadik because he did not give in to her wiles, to Potiphar's wife's seduction. He's actually called Yosef HaTzadik because whenever he does speak, Shem Hashem Shagur al Piv. Whenever he speaks, the name of God is in his mouth. It's the Baruch Hashem, it's the Emirtza Hashem. He has that from his father's home. And of course, he's very quickly appointed viceroy, Mishneh LaMelech. He is given a wife. And we don't have any idea about how he feels about all this. We're told that he was driven with a chariot through the streets of Mitzrayim, dressed in regal attire, a new name completely, differently shaven than he otherwise would have been. And everybody calls out to him, Avrech, and he is second in command. No, but all of Egypt is under his dominion. Again, how does he feel about this? And what does he think about his brothers and his father? Not a word. Not a word. The first time we have a glimpse into any emotion that this man may have had is when he names his first son, Menasha. And he calls him Menasha because he says, for God made me forget my father's home. Now, some commentaries see this as the worst of the worst. He's now become the assimilated Jew in Golus, who's changed his clothing, who's changed his name, who's changed everything, and is happy to forget it all. The Malbim thinks otherwise. He says he didn't say that made me forget my father. he said, made me forget my father's household. And in that household is a household full of strife and rivalry and jealousy. And that he's managed somehow to forget. But the Malbim says when somebody says, he made me forget, you already know that he actually remembers. It's actually saying the opposite of what you're really meaning. In other words, he's not forgotten for one moment. He has another son, and he names him Ephraim. He says, for God made me fruitful, but he calls this in this alien land. So though he's second command, and he's married, and he has children, and he has an Egyptian name, Egypt is not his home. So he has no family, and he really does not have a country. And he remains, if you like, an exile in disguise, dressed as somebody else. What does he feel? Well, he's stopped feeling. To survive, he's needed to repress all feelings. And we won't hear it until, as Harav Sorotskin in Oznaim LaTorah tells us, he says, we think of Yosef as Baal HaChalomot, or Yosef HaTzadik, because he evokes God's name all the time. He says what he really is the master of tears. Because while we attribute that to his mother, Rachel mevaka al baneha, me'ana lehinachem, you understand, she refuses and continues to cry. In the Torah itself, there's no mention of Rachel's tears. Only in Yirmiyahu, not a word, not a word. And what we do see is when he begins for the first time, his brothers show up and he recognizes them. They don't recognize him. And not all of them are there, only 10 of them are there. Binyamin is now left at home to be with Papa. He's kind of stepped into the shoes of the Ben Zikunim, who is not only the baby of the family, but is actually the one that serves his father all the time. And he stepped into the shoes that Yosef once had taken. He accuses them of spying. He accuses them of being aliens that have come here to try to conquer this place. And he knows who they are, but he's testing them or needling them or punishing them. Take your pick. And in your first source here, it's in the 42nd chapter, we hear that in prison he hears them talking to one another. Vayomru ish el achiv. And they spoke, and it doesn't tell us who said what. Aval hashemim anachnu. But we are guilty. Al achinu asher rainu tzarat nafsho b'itchaneno eleinu. We saw the agony of his soul when he pleaded with us. Velo shamanu, and we refused to listen. Al ken ba eleinu atzara hazot. This is why this trouble has come to us. And when he hears them saying this, he steels himself. He steels himself. And what happens then is, Vayan Reuven otam lemor, and Reuven, hearing them saying this, gives it back to them. Halo amalti lechem lemor al tichteu bayeled. I told you at the time, don't sin against the boy. You see, he's calling him the boy. He was only 17. Velo shamatem, and you didn't listen. Gam damo hinei nidrash. Now his blood, because they're presuming, of course, that by now he must be dead. Because when you were sold into slavery, you were put into backbreaking labor that usually killed you. Vehem lo yad'u ki shomea Yosef. They didn't know that Yosef not hears but understands what they're saying. Ki hamelitz benotam, because he was using an interpreter the entire time to disguise who he really is. And hearing his brothers regret, vayisov me'alehem, So he turned away from them, vayifk, and he cried. But he immediately returns, vayashav elehem, he comes back to them, vayidaber alehem, and he spoke to them harshly, vayikach meitam et Shimon, and he took Shimon. I'm sorry, dibur is hard. Dibur is vayisov melehem vayefk. He turned away, sevivon. He turned away from them, cried, but immediately returns to them. As opposed to how?
I don't know. Is it right?
It's biblical Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, you would say hu bacha. And here you say vayefk. Yeah. Vayashav elehem, he returns to them, vayidaber alehem, vayikach meitam et Shimon, and he takes Shimon from them. Remember, Shimon was the one that first spoke up and said, let's kill him. Vayasor oto leinehem, and he imprisons him as they all see it, and he says, I don't want your family's blood on my hands. You guys take food, and you go back and bring me your younger brother. Now, once they leave, Chazal tell us that he took Shimon out of his chains and wined and dined him. Whether he did or not, the Torah itself does not tell us this. They return, and this time, after having persuaded their father, who cried and said, one of them I lost, and now you're going to take the last one, and my wife died on me, and this is horrible. And they feel, of course, heartbroken, but he recognizes that he has no choice. They're all going to die of hunger if they don't send him down. And they go down this time with Binyamin. And what happens there is, and you can see now in Perek Mem Gimel, Vayishal lahem leshalom. And he asks them, is everything okay? Are you all well? And he greets them suddenly friendly. Vayomer hashalom avichem hazaken. And your old father, is he well? The one that you said, ha'odenu chai, is he still alive? And many of the Mefarshim says, what do you mean, is he still alive? They told you all about his father and he can't be departed from him. And he wants to know, wait a minute, you said that you can't take Binyamin away from him because if he loses Binyamin too, he will die. But he didn't die when you took me. My father can't be alive, can he? Because if he was alive, he would have come searching for me. You see, Yosef is beginning to reveal just one layer of the onion. And that is that he's been living with this resentment about, when are you going to come and redeem me? When are you going to come and get me? And it occurred to him that they had abandoned him. Not merely his brothers, but even his father. And unless his father is not alive, then he could somehow reconcile himself that his father would have come for him. But if his father is alive and he didn't come for him, so many years later, and you didn't come searching for me, you've given up on me. Vayomru shalom le'avdecha le'avinu. He's well, our father. Odenu chai, he's still alive. And they bowed to him. How did he then feel? The resentment, the anger that he'd managed to assuage that maybe dad is dead, now arouses again. And then he sees his brother, Vayisai Nav, Vayard Binyamin Achiv Ben Imo. And he sees Binyamin, his brother, from the same mother. Every other place where we had Imo mentioned unnecessarily, because we already know who Binyamin is, and we already know that he was the son of Rachel, but he recognizes his mother's face. The resemblance is there. Vayomer hazeh achichem hakaton, This is your little brother? And the Medrash, and Rashi quotes it there, says he's by now married and he's got 10 kids. This is your little brother? ויאמר אלוקים יחונך בני. And here something happens between this verse and the next verse. The Medrash fills in the story. He asks him his name. Are you married? Yeah. I had a brother, he says, he's long gone. I haven't forgotten him a single day. And then he lists the children's names, and every one of the children's names was named for an event. Oh, and how I cried when he couldn't come to my wedding, when he wasn't there for my children's births. But I have named them so I would never, ever forget him. And that suddenly shatters Yosef's conception that he'd been long forgotten by his brothers, even by Binyamin, and that probably even by his father. In fact, maybe they're relieved that he's not there anymore, because his presence brought nothing but anguish in the family, struggles in the family. And when he sees him, Vayimaher Yosef, and Yosef rushes, Ki nichmeru rachamav al achiv, and he just can't take it anymore. He's like burning inside with pity for him. And there is an incredible phrase here, Vayivakesh lifkot. Aaron Lichtenstein says that there is an interesting parallel here. The last time we saw that word Vayivakesh is et achai anochi mevakesh. And here he says Vayivakesh. He longed to cry. Why? This Harav Lichtenstein did not say. But I did recall reading the book by Harav Yisrael Meir Lau, who describes when they were in the DP camp, and finally the Jewish chaplain, Rabbi Herschel Schechter, approached him and started speaking to him in Yiddish, and was kind to him and touched his cheek. He was a little boy. He began to cry. He said all those years hidden in the camps, he learned not to cry. Sometimes when it hurts so much and you're choked up, you want to cry. You long to cry because crying would be a relief. And he wants so badly to cry, so he runs out of the room. Vayavo hachedra, and he came into his private room, leaving them. Vayevshk shama, and he cried there. And then he doesn't return that quickly, because afterwards you will hear that he doesn't return until he doesn't wash his face and calm himself down. This time he finally got a good cry. When Yosef finally reveals himself to his brothers and he says, Ani Yosef, and they are taken aback, scared, shocked. When he tries to explain, he says, I know that you didn't necessarily mean it for the good, but God meant it for the good. Don't worry about it. We're told, Velo yachol Yosef lihitapek. This time Yosef could no longer restrain and hold it in. Lechol hanitzavim alav, in front of all of the people that were there. Vayikra, and so he screamed out and he said, Hotziu kol ish me'elai, take every man out of here, remove everyone. Velo amad ish ito, and no one stood there. Bihitvada Yosef el achav, when he finally made himself known to his brothers and told them who he is. And then they showed nothing but terror and revulsion. And what we're told there is, Vayiten et kolo bivchi. He let out his voice, and this time it's a loud weeping. Vayishmeu Mitzrayim, and though everybody had left the room, the whole palace heard it. All of Egypt heard it. They all knew that he was crying. And what does he then do? As they turn away from him, Vayipol al tzavarei Binyamin achiv. He falls on his brother Binyamin's neck. Vayefk, and he cries. Ubinyamin bacha al tzavarav. And Binyamin also cries, embracing him as well. But his brothers still remain like statues of stone. So he approaches them, that they won't approach him. Vayenashek lekol echav, and he kisses each one of them. Vayefk alehem, and he cries over them. But they don't cry over him. They don't kiss him. But only when he starts sobbing and kissing them, acharechen dibru echav ito, they could finally open up their mouths and speak. There was still a wall between them. He sends them off with lots of food and gosh knows what else, and they go back to bring back the whole mishpucha. And then, of course, you will hear that Yaakov comes down with the whole family, 70 all in total, with their sheep and their cattle and whatever they have. And as they approach Goshen, we are told, Vayesol Yosef Malkavto, Yosef hitched his chariot. And Rashi there, of course, tells you that he could have had any servant doing it, but he heard that they were approaching. He couldn't wait. And Rashi says, Ahava mekalkelet tashura. Such love changes, modifies whatever is the normal protocol. Vaya likrat Yisrael aviv. And he goes, approaches, and notice that it's this time called Yisrael. I won't even go to the full thesis about why it's called sometimes Yaakov, sometimes Yisrael. Vayera elav, and he appeared to him. Who appeared to whom? Not told. Vayipol al tzavarav, and he fell on his neck. Who fell on whose neck? Vayefk al tzavarav, and he cried on his neck. Od, even more. Rashi follows the path that if you're using a pronoun, it must refer to the subject of the sentence, and since this is all one verse, Vayesol Yosef. Yosef is the subject of the sentence. He is the one that hitches the chariot, and since no other, and it says he went towards his father, it must be, and has his father appeared to him? He fell on his father's neck and cried on his father's neck even more. Od, more. What's the more? Because he's been crying an awful lot. Rashi says that at that moment Yaakov did not cry. He remained stiff and took all of the love that he felt for his son and directed it to Hashem and said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The Netziv of Volozhin wants to read it a little bit differently, since the Torah doesn't quite say it this way. He says, he went with his chariot, dressed as an Egyptian prince, and rode to his father. And he appeared before him. Who appeared before whom? When Yaakov saw the Egyptian prince, not knowing who he is, what did he do? He bowed. But as Yosef galloped closer and approached, he saw that the face is Yosef's, and saw that Yosef had managed to finagle that his father would bow to him. Angry at this humiliation and denigration, that a father would bow to his son, when Yosef fell on his neck, he would not cry or show any affection, because at that moment he was angry. Others add that he was angry not because he bowed, because the Torah doesn't tell us that he bowed, but he was angry for the following reason. Yosef was 17 years old when he met his brothers, and they threw him into the pit and sold him into slavery. He was 30 years old when he was appointed viceroy and brought before Pharaoh. 13 years. 7 years have passed for the years of plenty, a total of 20. 2 years into the famine before the brothers came down. 22 years. Granted, some of those years Yosef was a slave or in prison. But from the time of 30, 9 years he's been in power and not a single postcard. 9 years he didn't send a message, he's alive. Each one harboring his resentments that are not spoken. The Ramban disagrees. The Ramban says that there's a rule of grammar that if you have a subject and then you have a predicate in which there's an object that is a person, such as Yasor Yosef Malkafto Vaya Likrat Israel Aviv Goshna, that the next phrase, and that's why you notice that they substitute a semicolon for the Te'ameh HaMikra here, the next one would be Yisrael. Vayera elav, and as he appeared to him, as Yosef appeared to him, Yaakov fell on his son and cried. And who remained stiff as a board? According to the Ramban, Yosef. He says, for it's more common that fathers cry for their children than children cry for their fathers. I would beg to differ. Now, it's true that generally we say that a mother can raise 10 children and 10 children can't take care of a mother. But I think that it is often forgotten to what degree children hurt for their parents, to what degree they empathize with them, to what degree they suffer for their parents' sufferings, and how much they grieve for them. I'm not going to tell you that all children are that way, but I do believe that many children not only empathize, but sometimes empathize with the parents even more than the parent empathizes here. If we take the Ramban's position that it's the father, why does he say so? He proves it that the father tore his clothing when they brought him Yosef's coat dipped in blood and said, Hakerna, do you recognize this? We're told that they tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and he had mourned all of his days. Mashma that he'd been crying od. He's been crying for a long, long time, living under the delusion that his son is actually killed and has been dead. And that's why he did not come searching for him, because remember that he interpreted it as a wild beast had torn him away. Each one locked in himself. Then why did Yosef remain this way? Because he's thinking, where were you, Papa, all these years? Or perhaps it was the whole family there. And Yosef had learned the hard way that he needs to keep a distance, a separation between him and his father, so that his brothers won't be jealous. He needs to keep this regal demeanor and not be his father's little boy. And that's why you will notice that from then until his death, Yosef was never alone with his father. He sent them to live in Goshen. He made sure that they were taken care of. He sent Menasha and Ephraim to be there, and Chazal tell us that Ephraim used to learn with his Zayde. But he never went alone. He kept his distance, because that would be better for the family. And if the family were to survive and become a nation, he needs to be out of the picture. You see, there is no tribe called Yosef. Oh, he gave Yosef a double portion, but named it for Ephraim and Menashe. If Yosef was a narcissist, he's now become the master of self-effacement, of keeping himself out of the picture. He will continue to do what he does in Egypt, but he won't allow himself to be close to the family, because it's better for the family that he's not there. And so then what happens is, towards the end of his life, and as he feels death approaching, you remember that Yaakov calls for Yosef to come, and Yosef comes with his 2 sons. And he puts them in front of them, you remember. Yeah. And the hands are switched around, and he does whatever he does. But he doesn't, and it says, and he blessed him. But you're not told what blessing he ever gave to Yosef. It's a silent blessing. It's inside, thank God for you. And then he's called again. Yosef hears that his father is dying. And he comes rushing this time, but he's now in the presence of all of his brothers in the bed. And his father wants to bless them all before he dies. And you remember he'll begin with Reuven and all the way through all of the children. And in the process, he describes Yosef. And what does he say? What is the blessing of Yosef? He says, you withstood the arrows of slander. Does he know or doesn't he know? Did he know what happened to Yosef? Chazal say that Yosef refused to ever be there alone, so his father would never be able to ask him, how did you really come down here? Because he would not be able to lie to him. And there was one thing that Yosef was going to do that would become the ultimate tikkun, says the Abarbanel, for the flaw that was in his personality. As daddy's little favorite, he came bearing tales about his brothers. You remember, and he would always tell about what they're doing. He was not going to do this ever again. He would never again malign his brothers or even tell the truth, you understand, and have his father think less of his brothers. So what happens after he finishes blessing all of his children? Vayichal Yaakov letzavot et banav. He finished commanding them. Did you notice it's not listed as blessing them, but commanding them, giving each one his charge, recognizing in each one what his position would be, what his special qualities were. And there he skipped over Reuven, and skipped over Levi, and skipped over Shimon, and went to Yehuda. He would become the king, you understand? Levi would become the Kohen. And now the various tasks that once were only the firstborns are being split amongst the others. Vayesof raglav el hamita, and he gathered his feet into the bed. Vayigva, and ligvoa is essentially the death rattle. It's the last breath, that difficult, agonizing breath. Vayesof el amav, and he was gathered unto his people. Vayipol Yosef al pnei aviv. Now to the Ramban, this is the first time that Yosef allows himself to kiss and cry and hug his father. Vayipol Yosef al pnei aviv. He falls on his father's face. Vayefgalav, and he cried over him. vayishak lo, and he kissed him. As he had promised his father, he went to Paro, made arrangements to take the burial, the body to Eretz Israel and be buried in Ma'arat HaMachpelah. The whole Mishpocha and half of Egypt go there and give him a royal burial, and then they come back. And no sooner do they come back, the brothers send a messenger to Yosef. Vayitzavu el Yosef lemor, and they commanded him to go to Yosef to say, Avicha tziva, your father commanded prior to his death that we tell you. So shall you say to Yosef, Ana sana pesha achecha, please forgive the sin of your brothers, v'chatatam kira'ag malucha, and all of their wrongdoing because they paid you back with evil. Ve'ata sana, and again, bear them, tolerate them, forgive them. Lepesha avdei elokei avicha, if nothing else, then forgive us because we are worshipers, servants of the God of your father. This could not be true. This was a lie. You see, the brothers were sure that when Yosef came with his two sons, and at that time, of course, you remember that Yaakov had him swear that he would not bury him in Egypt and he would take him back to Eretz Israel. They were sure that Dad knows. And they are afraid that Yosef was waiting for Dad to die to take vengeance when he had no such intention at all. So misunderstood. He kept his distance all of those years, and they were many years. All of those years, he did not go to his father. He did not kiss his father. He did not let his father hug him. All of those years so that they would not be jealous. And now they come back and tell him, Dad said, forgive us. Don't forgive us. Don't take vengeance on us. What do you say to that? Vayef Yosef. So Yosef cried. What do you say to that? There's nothing to say. There's no words. So misunderstood and so lonely. Yosef the dreamer became the loneliest of all people, who virtually wiped himself out. There was no ego left at all. And in spite of it all, they are distant from him. He is alienated. He lives in an alien country, alienated from his land, alienated from his family, alienated from the Egyptians. Yosef will die when we hear in Parashat Shmot. And he'll be forgotten. And they would have forgotten him all were it not for Moshe, who remembered to take his bones out and bring them back to Eretz Israel, where Yehoshua ben Nun ultimately buried them. Where? In Shechem, the place where he was sold into slavery. So Yosef is not only Baal HaChalomot, Yosef is Baal HaDma'ot. He's the master of tears, because some things you just can't articulate. There's no words for it. All you can do is cry. Thank you.